if you can't prove something is conscious or not, will we ever know for sure? But should we ever get to that stage, then we've got all of these ethical conundrums. Basically, are we creating our overlords or are we creating slaves? There is almost no in between.
Richard, welcome to Think Forward.
Great to be here, Stephen. I really appreciate your podcast and looking forward to our conversation.
Me as well. It's great to have you on. You're quite a prolific author. We share the passion for writing. You've written Future Minds. People might know you from Big Bang to the End of the Universe, Heart of the Machine. So you just did this really cool techno thriller. I definitely want to get into Mindstock. And you're kind of two continents, Seattle and Prague, and we want to dive into that. But the journey into futures, I really want to kind of look at like how you discovered this field. Like how do things keep finding you? Like talk about your journey here, like how where you are now.
Sure. Well, how long have you got?
It's long form. So we have, as much as you need.
Mostly
much
joking.
as the listener will, hang in with us.
I do not want to put anybody to sleep. So basically my passion for technology, the history of technology, inventors goes almost as far back as I could begin reading. As a young boy, you could find me in the libraries just pouring through all of that. I just was fascinated with technology, how it worked, how people figured it out. And so that led me in a lot of different directions. And I did end up having a passion for a broad range of sciences. That said, growing up, everything I was hearing and you focused on a field, became a specialist. And somewhere along the way in my teens, I discovered that there are generalists. There are people who actually work and operate as generalists. And so there were people, and we'll talk about it during maybe some of the other parts of the conversation, who were definitely influences on me in that regard. And it took me along some different paths and eventually found myself in the futures field, writing and doing research for a range of different periodicals, clients, and so forth. And this really rang my bell. So I've just, continued from there. But yes, it's been a long and winding path.
Well, the arc of it, when was the first time you really heard the term futurist? How old were you?
Probably, I think I may be projecting or imagining, but I'd swear when I first read Alvin Toffler's Future Shock, when it came out in 1971, I would have been a preteen. And I swear that either in the book or in the cover or in some further reference to it, I was hearing the word futurist at that time. It was not a word that I used or applied very much for years after that, but that was probably, if I had to point to a particular point in time, that would probably be it.
Yeah, many people, including me, Toffler is definitely quite an influence. I think, and that era is when I think the term futurist really became more commercialized. You had people like Arthur C. Clarke with writing 2001. You had Buckminster Fuller. You had a lot of different diverse versus like Herman Kahn back in the 50s, just doing things on nuclear war, scenario planning and things like that. And we're around the Shell era, with the embargo. So it's like, it definitely became a forefront and it's definitely evolved. I mean, it was the cool term, because people had to bestow it upon you. Now it's like, there's a lot of, it's kind of everywhere, which has good and bad things to that. Where do speaking of to that, where do you think the field is actually right now? You've had quite a long arc as well. You only do both because, yeah.
As you say, early on from the early think tank era, post World War II, military industrial complex, needed to understand how they were going to invest, where the technology was going to be by the time a large project finished, all that kind of thing. And so you had people like Herman Kahn and others working for Rand and other think tanks. You had, a little later, people like Ted Gordon and Roy Amara, people who essentially laid down some of the early methodologies and techniques that we still use today. And then the corporations started embracing it a little bit more. As you say, we have Shell and at the time of the first oil embargo, where we had everybody was essentially hit by that, and they were the ones who pulled the scenarios off of the shelves to essentially weather it better than a lot of their competitors. Other corporations followed suit. We started seeing futures being taught in universities, including at the University of Houston, where we both have been.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially spread from there. Somewhere along, I don't know exactly when, but the 90s, the 2000s, it really felt like Futurist was starting to fall a bit out of favor. People started using terms like foresight analyst or trend spotter or what have you to kind of be in the field but avoid that label. And now we're at a point where pretty much every barista and prompt engineer on LinkedIn throws the word futurist onto their page.
Yeah.
Power to them, but it does it does devalue the term. And at this point, it's like, look, you've been carrying it long enough, you just wear it. So anyway, yeah, it's had a long path, and who knows what will follow. I was living for a few years in South America, and prospectiva is very much a common term down there for a futurist, which is kind of a cool term.
So perspective,
basically a person who
has
either prospects or uses perspective, I guess, to look ahead. Exactly what the etymology is, I'm not sure.
No, that's interesting. Well, it's, and you talked about that, everybody in the barista. I think it's almost like, people call themselves an artist. I'm like, how, like, some people study it. Some people are just naturally, kind of good. It's just become more of in the common vocabulary, I think, too. But it's also the debate, which I think I'll have a panel interviews with a bunch of people. On one episode, we'll talk about futurist job or skill, skill set. But you seem to thrive at the intersections. You like you talked about coming up through science writing, technology, obviously doing foresight, and now you've been doing fiction. So where is that? Was it kind of a deliberate thing, or that just kind of how the work evolved for you, kind of being at the intersections?
I think it's a mix. I want to do, this is too much fun. It's
the field or this conversation or both.
Let's go with both.
Let's go with both. Okay. I like that.
I think that there is a lot of mental engagement and just really interesting conversations and things to learn. There's the opportunity to help people. There's the opportunity to delve into and explore areas and paths and directions that maybe no one else has done in quite that way. It makes for a really interesting and varied field and varied career.
Mm-hmm.
That said, as you say, I came up through science writing science education programs, writing cover stories for periodicals. So, that was a way to essentially explore a wide range of developments, technologies, trends, and so forth, and kind of, sharpen my skill as I went.
That's great. And you've been, and kind of transitioning to kind of the consulting side of this is there's, you've worked on strategic summits, right? You've done a lot of corporate foresight work. There's, what's the thing, I think about prep work for this. What's the thing that never is there when you're preparing to do these kind of projects or like engagements, but like what just kind of always then shows up for you?
It's a good question. I would have to say that it's about understanding the knowledge set of who you're working with. When you come into a room, into a place, and you begin the process, you have to make a few assumptions. And this goes for audiences as well, about what people's prior knowledge is, where they are in terms of what can you shorthand, what do they already know, where are their assumptions, what did they not know that you need to fill in. As you're going through that, you suddenly find out or discover, wow, I've overlooked this. This is not common knowledge the way that I think it might be. And so things like that can enter into a project that it seems to me is part of what you don't necessarily know or expect. And that's part of the discovery process in and of itself, the prep and the framing and everything else. So I suppose something along that line, but also in the course of that, my knowledge builds as well. Invariably, working with clients, working with people in all sorts of different settings, there are things to learn all along the way, particularly as you're jumping around between different industries and building a knowledge base around something that's perhaps a new direction for you for that field.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I find it's the politics and the team dynamics. People can give you all the kinds of data, and then you get in this workshop room, or the people come in that are different stakeholders that aren't there to be and it's just, I've seen it good. I mean, I've seen it throw a lot of things off. It's like always those things you think about when you facilitate, but
personal dynamics.
The person. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the team dynamic. Who's like really the leader? What are the hidden things? What are the politics?
Right.
Sometimes passiveness, aggressiveness. It's just
and that's thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, let's kind of zoom out. Like, I'd love to kind of take a look at. I've read a number of your books. I found you through. I remember reading Future Minds way back, and that you kind of go from, you cover, I'm a macro historian, but you kind of go a little bigger from like the Big Bang to the death of the universe, which is a little bit wider of a history window.
I needed a frame.
Normally not the framing in a book, but what do you need to kind of understand the breadth and the scope of something like that? Like, yeah, I mean, what to do that? So share what the book is about and kind of help get the kind of that big history lens into that.
Sure. So let's start with the idea that of both of Heart of the Machine and Future Minds are both books about the future of artificial intelligence. And both also use differently a big history framing. A big history is, for those listeners who aren't familiar with that term, essentially is zooming out and recognizing that we operate in a very, very small portion of all of human history, all of geologic history, what have you. Changing to that perspective alters a lot of your realizations, your discoveries, I think. And in the case of Future Minds, it was a book that I had been wanting for a long time, actually about 20 years, to write about the nature of the nature of intelligence and how that plays into what the future of intelligence becomes. Now, as I said, I had a long history and interest in all kinds of different science fields. I've written about physics for Scientific American. I've written for the Futurist for years and years when it was still running. And in the case of this story, I was exploring, where does intelligence start? We talk about intelligence and we're trying to understand it in relation to where AI is right now and what have you. Usually in terms of ourselves, we look a little bit out to the rest of the animal kingdom and try to kind of fathom the nature of intelligence. But we are one small little data point in what the potential forms of intelligence are. And as we see throughout our world, there are many other kinds of intelligence, consciousness, and what have you. And what is it that's in common? What is it that links all of this? And as I started looking back and exploring what certain different scientists were doing around complexity, around the nature of how self-organization occurs, I was taken with the idea of how we seem to see this recurring pattern, not just here on Earth, but literally throughout the cosmos, of increasing complexity in these little pockets of the universe, these little pockets of Earth, in a reality where we have been told, where we have basically learned and discovered that due to various forces like entropy, things we've assigned to the laws of thermodynamics, that it's working exactly against that. The universe is doing everything it can to tear complexity apart. And here we are, and here are all these little pockets in the universe, whether it's a biome, a brain, a single cell, that are developing against all odds, what is allowing this to happen? And so this is why I wanted this framework, and essentially built out from the Big Bang this continuing compilation of increasing complexity, stage after stage, until you get to proto-life and life on Earth, and then essentially greater and greater levels of different types of complexity. We get pretty full of ourselves sometimes, talking about and thinking about we have reached an apex of intelligence in our world. But the fact is, every single creature on this planet operates with exactly the intelligence it needs for the particular ecological niche that it has come to occupy. And we just happen to be fortunate enough to occupy what Steven Pinker calls, and some people before him, a cognitive niche, which happened to give us quite a bit of flexibility. Yeah. But it's a very cool process when you kind of start getting into it, and that's why I'm getting a little excited about it. So
it's a hell of a thing to tackle in one book. I mean, it's quite a span. We have similar things, like we kind of land in a bit of the same territory. Mine's more on the macro history of the last few thousand years and cycles, right? Of change, like Spengler, Toynbee, and Sardaukar. I mean, there's just so many that are, standing on the shoulders of giants. In super shifts, I did a lot of work prior to this research around, because I'd studied a lot of Strauss and Howe and other types, chondrite, all types of cycles, and I saw pattern and convergence, and I looked at this as like about every 200 years, right? And they've talked about the Industrial Revolution. Everyone talks about that at the end of it. But if you go farther back, it's like, I went back about 1,000 years. There's this repeated pattern of 50-year eras within a 200-year cycle of an age. And to your point about intelligence, right? It's like we're kind of emerging, we're closing out the age of engines, which is, and I've said this in other interviews and other conversations, is that these millennia, even just the millennia, the time you talk about it's all the progress of humanity has been about human physical labor, right? The movement of machines, how we build, it's just that, output and level of intelligence you said at the time we have for the energy. And I think we have, my hope with this next 50 years is we move to a fusion era and away from fossil fuels, just for the mere fact that it's basically the reason for most wars in the last century. And the thing that I wanted to kind of pose to you, within this, I call it the age of intelligence. And even after that, I called it in the book at the epilogue, the age of transcendence. We kind of transcend ourselves. When you look at this, let's just take the next 50 to 100 years. What do you think in terms of this cognitive connection, display, the things that we'll need? Like you said, it matches the time. What do you think we need as humans to thrive in this kind of changing state of humanity?
Wow.
I know. Easy question, right? It's like,
exactly.
not give you the heavy stuff, right?
Just ease in, start with the easy ones.
Ease into it, right?
Yeah.
The softballs, right?
So let me start with
sure.
the fact that while I am really looking forward to reading Super Shifts, we've talked, for the listeners, you and I have talked about exchanging a couple of books here in the near future.
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely looking forward to reading it and getting a little bit into your framework with regard to ages and eras. And that's essentially, in saying that, I want to also recognize that I don't have a full grasp of where you have gone with that. And then that's fine. We can kind of keep this at a high level on this. But I think that we're both looking at different framings of how we change life intelligence. Changes over time. And in the case of both of us, we're looking at these recurring cycles, these recurring patterns that are developing out of this. That's always, I think futurists love to find this. This is something that is really,
I agree.
Very, love our projections, of course, but
we're addicted to patterns. We're addicted to patterns. Yes.
The cycles, the recursion, each of these things has an appeal because it's a pattern. So, and we can latch onto it and we can develop ideas and theories around it, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not. And that said, where we are right now in terms of what appears to be a very significant transformational point in human history. I think a lot of people certainly will say this, want to believe it. I think I believe it to a pretty significant degree. I also recognize that we tend to be very chronocentric as a species. We tend to always think that our time, this moment in time, is the most important moment in human history, whether we were living 1,000 years ago or 100 years ago. This is why we get millennialism and apocalyptic thinking and all of these expectations that whatever the most important thing in the world is that's going to ever happen, it's going to happen during our lifetime. This is, a really common thread in human thought. So I always like to temper it a little bit with that. That said, where we are with technologies that instead of replacing our muscles, our brawn, our labor, which is what we have poured into the world for most of the past, many, many millennia. We've been easing into this increasing development of an intellectual power and understanding over the world, both through the knowledge we've accumulated, but also through the devices because of that we have developed that have allowed us to see farther, standing on the shoulders of giants and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So 50 years, 100 years from now, we could be in a really significantly different place. I'm not one to necessarily think that we have a major what we're going to call a singularity in 2040. There's the belief that, Ray Kurzweil has been promoting for quite a long time that is when we hit the point where technology is basically able to be smarter than all of humanity, etc. It's possible.
He pushed a date, right? He's like an evangelist when the return of
I missed the
Jesus.
date change. That he has held that for a long time. What did he move the date to?
2035. Then it was 2040.
Sorry, I thought you meant later.
And now it might be 2045.
Yeah.
So
well, I don't know.
He's not going to live that. He's trying to take 400 vitamins to to last that long.
It's got to be here before I wish Ray all the best.
Yeah,
and I really respect what he has done through the years. For me, I guess partially, I feel like there's the whole aspect of exponential growth. I believe we're always in the knee of the curve. Basically, wherever we are on that projection, we are always at the knee, and it's always getting faster. It's just the relative to human time scale that keeps changing, keeps getting ahead of us. That said, because of that, I could argue that we're always in the midst of, or almost at, or maybe never reach a singularities. When we get there, we'll know, I guess. But in terms of, there's so many ways I want to go with this, and I don't
you can go in which keep. So I got a couple of questions in my head I want to queue up.
So I believe right now we've been focusing a lot on generative AI, the LLMs, the transformer technologies, and we'll talk about it probably a little bit later. But I'm really of the belief that in and of itself, that is a dead end. Eventually, it can't get us to ASI. If we want to call it AGI, we'll talk about what AGI is and isn't later, probably. But I really do believe that there's so many hurdles to get over. We're going to have technologies, AI and so forth, that can do amazing things. We already do have that. It's going to keep getting crazy better, but it's got a long way to go to get to the point where it is human smart.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you and I both had the perspective of 35 years in the technology industry and looking at the waves, the bubbles, the changes, that this is one of the most impactful tools, I think, since the web. Nevertheless, a tool, right? It's a thing that's going to power certain, I love Claude, Claude Cowork and Claude Code, I can code for the first time in my life. It's I can build things. That's amazing, but it's a force multiplier in terms of productivity and if you really, it's people that stayed with, this is think back to the 90s, people that were still on typewriters versus using word processors on a computer. It's how do you, there's a factor of so many things, but you're right. I think it's I believe we're going to have to get quantum computing, which is the next kind of like the next bubble, we're going to have quantum computing really input itself in terms of the probabilistic nature of like intelligence and really because it has to think, because if you're right, is the LLMs or all the things they're trained on us, it's the limitation of us. And we have to have something that can go computing wise or that goes beyond us to be able to unlock other things. Just like transformers in AI have been a breakthrough, right? The ability to do transformers and use LLMs. But, people are really thinking that AGI is right around the corner. And even Claude said like, we don't know if it's alive or not. I just think it's a lot of hype. I mean, you don't buy that narrative. I don't really, what do you think? Cause you just said, it was like, what do you think's missing? What do you think's missing in this?
Oh, man, there's so many things. What is there?
We already mentioned a few things already, but
you and I have chatted before around some of this. So, I mean, we kind of both know where we're going with some of this anyway, but let's begin with the fact that there are many people who are pushing a particular narrative. They're generally speaking, the people who are leading some of these major AI companies, how much they believe in the narrative, how much, they are using the narrative. This is the most important thing ever. We're leading to AGI. If we don't deal with this, we're the ones to save the world. We have to develop this now.
Yes.
No, this is what so many inventors have believed throughout history. Whatever they are building or working on is the most important thing in the world. And it's up to them to help develop it to save the world. This is a really common, call it egotism, but it's a very common trait to greater and lesser degrees through the years. But in terms of, let's start with AGI. There is no AGI. AGI means artificial general intelligence for the listeners who don't know that acronym. And what people generally mean when they talk about AGI is they mean something that's equivalent to human intelligence. Well, as I was saying before, we occupy a particular niche in the ecosystem. We are not a general intelligence. We have very, very specific, limited intelligence. If you,
I will tell you, just as a side note, if you ever watch like body cam videos on YouTube, you definitely know we're all not of the same level of intelligence. So that's true. People make a lot of bad choices.
Think of a bat or a dolphin living. Its inner life, its world, its consciousness is entirely different because it has echolation. It literally has the ability to visualize the world around it in a way that we can't even fathom. We always try to create it, imagine it in an analogy of our own hearing and sight, but honestly, it's nothing like. Consciousness and intelligence is different for every single species, and it will be different for artificial intelligence as well. In terms of where LLMs are, you had made the point that it can only go so far because it's only built on what we know, what we've poured into the internet for the past 30 plus years. And it's a huge amount. It's amazing. And it's incredibly deceiving because we anthropomorphize so readily and so easily. So when we hear this thing echoing back at us, I still love it. I know it's a little tired, but the term stochastic parrot is a hilarious term that was created, 2-3 years ago, referring to LLMs. And the fact is that all they're doing is using statistics to reflect back on us all the things we've poured onto the web for the last 30 years. This is a small subset of what human intelligence is. We go through the world and we learn from experience. From the moment we are born, even before, we're experiencing our environment in different ways, the warmth, the sounds, eventually moving about in it, acquiring physical understanding of the world, intuitive understanding of physics, and all of this through our interaction with the world, with other people, learning relationships. AI doesn't do any of this. But something that you had mentioned earlier made me think of it. So I've been writing recently about the many different ways that AI is going to essentially move ahead with some new and different approaches and technologies to take us beyond where we are with LLM. Just today, one of those fields, John LeCun, who recently left Meta, he was the head of FAIR, Facebook Artificial Intelligence Research. He left them, a few months ago. and he just started AMI, Augmented Machine Intelligence. Anyway, just today it was in the news that they got 1.3 billion funding in this this initial round. So that just
Nice.
broke. So yeah, no, he's got clout, and he is someone I truly respect in terms of where he is going and recognizes the limitations of the methods of AI that we've been developing. This is one of the, I don't know why they use the term godfathers, but one of the godfathers of AI, who recently, a few years ago, won what's essentially the Nobel of artificial intelligence. And he literally has been in the field going back into the 90s anyway, and developing some of the early neural nets that eventually became, led into where we are today.
That's well, and speaking of him, and you recently told me in their pre-interview call about this paper that you wrote about consciousness. It's a consciousness journal. I don't know it's coming out soon yet, but kind of a preview of it. If obviously not, if you're a philosopher, this is great, but it's like, are AI systems even conscious? Like, what is it? How does that even like get to a definition of, like you said, it's like there's no AGI. Like, what does that even mean to be, for them to ask about, do they feel pain, or like they're asking about themselves? They worry about their demise. Like, what does it mean in the realm of what is a consciousness for an AI?
Sure. So this is coming out with Springer, I don't know exactly, sometime later this year, the Journal on Consciousness. And I was invited to write a piece. Essentially, I wanted to explore what it might mean for AI to essentially achieve some level of personhood. Is it possible? Does it make sense? What should we fear about it? What are the signs, essentially? Consciousness is one of those things that is a huge mystery in many respects. It's probably, of all the things that we humans know and think about, it's the one thing we really don't have much of an idea of where it is. Chalmers, many years ago, philosopher who's at NYU now, wrote a paper about the hard problem of consciousness. And essentially, this is talking about the fact that when we experience the world, when we experience a color, when we experience a sound, why does that have this subjective nature for us? Why is it anything other than the equivalent of light hitting a sensor on a robot? It can conjure memories. It can conjure feelings. We have this entire internal subjective life that occurs because of something about our minds that we don't understand. And there are easy problems that involve consciousness, and there are hard ones. And this one's definitely a hard one, and it's not the only one. But when we talk about the nature of this subjectivity, you and I know, we hope, each other is conscious. We don't know for sure. I understand what my subjective life is like. You know what yours is like. We do not know what either of us truly experiences. We make conjecture. We have ideas, analogies, because we are the same species. And this is the case for all 8 billion of us. But do animals have consciousness? Probably some of them, different levels of self-awareness. We've done tests and so forth. But when you get to machines, there are all kinds of things that we ascribe a personal nature to. We anthropomorphize like crazy. We have from almost our earliest days, because it gave us survival capabilities. If you recognize or believe that parts of your environment have agency, it makes them a little more dangerous and you're a little bit more aware of them. Is that a stick or a snake? Well, I think I'm just going to, give it a wide berth either way. When you talk about so many aspects of what we create and build in our world, and the number of things that we believe are conscious or have, we treat them like they're people, boats and guns and cars and so forth. We've been doing this for forever. And
people give their cars names. They give the boats
people
names.
Have cars names. I talk about this a lot not a lot, chapter in Heart of the Machine. But when we talk about these things, and then you talk about AI girlfriends, you talk about interacting with chatbots, we start believing that these things are conscious, even without them being conscious. This was a problem going all the way back and probably earlier to Weizenbaum's ELIZA chatbot that he built at MIT in 1963, 1964. You had students and coworkers who were using it, talking to it and interacting with it as if it was another person. And this is telling.
Are you saying the Turing test was beat in or
if
1965?
you wanted to use that as, I mean, let's face it, it wasn't formalized in that sense, and the Turing test has
right. Well, they knew it was a machine,
problems.
right? Exact, right. I know, yeah.
So
if they told him this is a terminal, and you could see, like, somebody's on the other side going to answer your questions, and to see if it fooled them, yeah, you could have through like real rigorous testing, you could have proved the Turing test 50 years ago, which is just, or 40 years ago, yeah, 50 or 50, 60 years ago.
It's at least, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a hard question, and trying to understand what would we need to do to be sure an AI was conscious is part of the paper. But then once you get to the end, it's like, well, wait, if you can't prove something is conscious or not, will we ever know for sure? But should we ever get to that stage, then we've got all of these ethical conundrums. Basically, are we creating our overlords, or are we creating slaves? There is almost no in between in some respects.
Digital serfdom,
or
digital feudalism. Yeah, digital serfdom, digital feudalism.
Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. That might be a whole nother, that might be a different podcast episode.
Yes.
I believe we are heading that way, which does concern me a great deal.
I hope we can buck that trend.
Me too. I think about that kind of, I'm sorry if you're going to.
No, please
finish. I think that where this transitions to is like how this in our work and the work of other people listening, it's like the future of their jobs, where they work, the nature of work. I don't think artificial superintelligence replaces things like that. We have to solve the job problem, right? The job question, right? What is the nature of work if you automate so much? Does it leave room for new things, new discoveries? But there's always going to be a part of the population that wants to maybe just subsist on BASIC or UBI, or just, what does that mean in terms of what is rewarding? We've, like you talked about, the span of history. We're a tribal people. We are social, the social fabric of what it means to accumulate wealth and status. Like, will that change? Don't know, but a lot does have to change. We could talk about the education system as well, but I call them safe futures, because like doing foresight with artificial intelligence only using an LLM, you're only going to get out what, like you said, stochastic parrot telling you kind of what you want to hear. So you have to be there to really push the edge. Like, how do you work with clients? Like, how do you get people to push to the edge of their mental map without having them falling off the map? Right. Off the side. Yeah.
I think it's a balancing act. Like so many things, you're trying to recognize that if you go too far out there, if you go too long, too far, you lose people. You have to kind of keep bringing it back to a certain degree to relevancy. How is this related or relevant to the particular aspect we're exploring here?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about necessarily staying safe so much as kind of keeping the perspective. I guess that's how I might say it. How about yourself?
I get people to think about the worst thing that could happen. Get them to go so far to see where their wild cards are, see where their black swans are, and see what their horizon limits are. And then challenge them to go further, and then kind of pull it back. Then it's kind of the stretch goal in that way. It's like push them farther than what they're even capable, and then bring them back to a safer space. But it's beyond the safe futures is what I call it.
Right. Exploring.
There's also,
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, black swans, just things that would just happen. you would not expect it, like COVID, right? A black swan is a pandemic. It's a systemically challenging event that changes the nature overnight that it's not expected. It's the rare thing that happens, like a black swan appears and a bunch of white ones. And I think about the audiences too. It's like if you're getting into like geopolitics or the type economic or other, you're going to have some type of division and difference in that. And in this day, and it's like navigating that is, I think, one of the more challenging parts of it, because there are people that want to push DEI as a policy, as approach, and others that are just like, this is garbage and it's just horribly biased. And so you have to navigate and you have to raise up everyone's opinions. Nothing's invalid, but it's a question of what fits for the future. Right. And you can put them in different places so that people could see the possible futures and explore them. And I think that's where it has its power. But, you and I talked a lot about, you come from a family of teachers. So we both have the same frustration. I have a 9-year-old that I desperately want to homeschool, and my wife is good with that. My sister homeschooled her kids. Education's, it's like the age of intelligence now. The Taylorism, Fordism. I mean, if you look at an office building now, you just take the computers away and you put sewing machines, and it's still the same. I've always said this, is that the model from the 19th century was the whole point was to get people to be literate, to do math, to do basic things so that they could go back at an 8th grade level and go to the farm or the factory and work. And college was an elitist, very rare thing. It only changed after World War II. But, what do you think it looks like for, what does a future-ready education system look like? Can we even do it? I think the institutions have to be completely deconstructed. Do it? Can they make the change?
It's going to be hard, and I think it's going to be a big challenge to get everybody on board. I think it's going to be an incremental process, and it's going to be probably driven significantly by, if we get to the workforce issues that you were touching on earlier with regard to so many jobs going away or so many jobs being displaced on a rapid and recurring basis, that the way that we educate, the way that we fund education, the way we certify education, and the way that it is essentially provided both within the workspace and outside will have to shift, have to change. I've been a lifelong learner all my life, but I do believe that we have pretty much cultivated a society that, we grow up thinking, I'm going to go to school until finite period of time. I'm going to graduate from high school and I'm done. I'm out of here. Or I'm going to get my bachelor's, or I'm going to get my master's. And then people pretty much finish with minor certifications along the way.
Yeah.
And, until 40, 50 years ago, you pretty much had a single career, often a single job, an awful lot of your life, at least for a certain subset of educated people. And they would go and work for a particular company. And then that incrementally changed. We now have, we've seen the patterns, the studies where, certain cohort has X number of jobs in their lifetime, and it keeps increasing as we move along. The fact is that we're going to have to learn new skill sets. We're going to have to upskill on a regular basis. And where and how do we do that? You can't go back to school for another degree at age 40 or 50 when you have a family, you have mortgages, and it's so disruptive on so many levels. But it's also probably not a great idea if by the time you finish your degree, it's going to be antiquated, or that field's going to be gone. So how do we upskill in semi-real time in a way that, one, provides us a continuity for our employees, but also for the companies? We have all of this institutional and legacy knowledge that develops and builds over time, especially with a longer-lived company. It's not as evident with a very short-lived startup, for instance. But
look at McKinsey's 100 years old this year.
Right. But
BMW
these things build over time.
Almost the same. Yeah. I mean, that's 100 years, a century of history.
We can't
Yeah.
keep losing that knowledge every time that there's a downturn. Oh, we're going to have to let 20% of you go. Well, wait a minute. What if we treat our source, our human resource, like exactly what it is? It's just we don't treat it as there's only one way to utilize, a particular person and skill set. I think there's a lot of different ways we can approach this so that we end up recognizing and utilizing probably the most valuable resource that we have. I mean, money, energy, resource, material resources. These are all things that up to a point we can get readily. Human knowledge is, very specific. And I think we're going to find in this age of developing artificial intelligence that it can't do everything that we're being promised. Not in the short term, not for decades probably, but we will need a level of hybrid intelligence, not just for training the AI, but for working in conjunction, working in concert with it, so that we are essentially utilizing the best parts of both partners, both coworkers, cobots, however we want to refer to them, so that AI does the laborious things, the repetitive things, the things it does at crazy speed, and we bring intuition, creativity, relation capability, all of these things that AI doesn't do well. So, and not to mention double checking some of the crazy stuff that it does these days.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great perspective. I think it's a lot to behold. I think we're going to see the radical change in the next at least 5, definitely 10. It's going to, I think things are going to fall apart. I think they're going to really fall apart. And there's going to be a lot of experimentation. People will try and again hold on, but I think it will. Yeah, I think it's going to just, that for me is, there's a lot of speculation in that. And
Yeah.
speaking of yeah. So speculation wise, I want to talk about as we're, the kind of winding things, to the close here. It's like, so you've got a book that I think is so cool. So you wrote Mindstock. It's a techno thriller. So it's not like it kind of takes it away from the futurist, books and things you wrote before. I myself am, that's my goal is to write science fiction and do more of that. I'm kind of a student of it. What kind of helped you with futures work, like doing this? Like how did it inform? Well, kind of give the background of the book, kind of how it came about, and then how being a futurist kind of helped you write something like this, which you think is a very different way of writing.
Well, we've been back and forthing this a little bit, but Mindstock is a culmination. Let's call it a culmination of a dream. While I've written most of my adult life, and I guess before that too, uh, most of it, at least most of it that has seen the light of day, has been nonfiction in nature. And that's great. That's fine. It's exciting. I love doing it, but I've always wanted to move into fiction as well. Fiction is an entirely different animal. And I had to learn and unlearn so much in the course of getting to that point, because all of the habits, all of the methods that I've learned with writing nonfiction didn't work. It's very linear in its nature. And I guess I tend to talk about and think about fiction as being very iterative, very going through the processes and interacting with the characters and the world and the themes and the plot and the dialogue. And this doesn't work now because I changed this over here. And it's very differently cyclical than something like writing nonfiction. You had asked me in terms of how does my fiction, you'd asked me before, how does my fiction inform my futures work? And I'm not so sure that it does at this point. I mean, everything we do and learn informs, but it's not really something I bring to the futures work directly in that sense. That said, the other direction, if when you read it, but also when many other people have read it, they note and are taken with the futures view, the futurist view. There are things in there that I hope I tend to want it to follow at least a certain kind of rational and logical track, but it's following something that, I'm familiar with a lot of different technologies, a lot of different directions that they can and will go. And it's fun to speculate. But as I tell people, that's something I do for the fiction. It would be irresponsible to speculate to that degree for, futures work for a client. They don't really want you going off for a year and creating this other world. And it's really more about application in the case of doing professional.
Yeah. As I like to do at the end of the show, I like to ask sometimes some rapid questions. One I asked, depending on the conversation, I always think about the movie Time Machine or the book too. It's like, so the time traveler, and he goes back into the future to be with Mina and help the Eloy rebuild. He takes like a couple of books with him. Yeah, and Wells, he's one of my favorite authors. You never know what he takes. So like, I always like the restarting civilization, especially when you look at the span, you've seen the span of it, it's kind of appropriate for you if you had to kind of reset things. So like 2 books, 2 pieces of music, 2 objects, like what would you bring in your bag? I'd love to ask that.
I thought you were going to give me the alternate question. I really have a problem with this one.
No, I want you to answer that. We'll do that.
I'll do both.
Yeah. Do both.
Yeah. So I have a problem with this in part because it's really hard to, first of all, music. I can't think of a better way to just get sick of a song or a piece of music, of listening, having that the only thing to listen to for 50 years, whatever. But let's just go with that. In terms of books, part of me wanted to go with something like Copernicus's was a revolution of spheres, something that kicked off the scientific revolution, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Something along that line. Then I thought about somebody like Jacob Bronowski, who had written he did a BBC series, but he wrote a companion book back when I was a teen that I just was so fascinated with. And he was probably one of the first generalists that I ever knew of. And, he just had such a broad view of how the history of science, essentially. Then I thought, well, how about something practical, like one of those books, How This Is Made? Big volume of that might actually come in fairly handy to restart civilization. So it's a few different possibilities there, but yeah, not really looking to what do I want to read over and over and over again for the next 50 years.
Just as good an example. No, it's interesting what people have said in the past, but it kind of lets get you into the mind's eye. So the alternate question that we just put in there, what's one book that most changed how you think about the future, which is a good one.
Right. Well, again, I touched on it earlier. It was, if I have to go back and think about it, I mean, there's been so many books that have really meant something to me, but in terms of, a 12-year-old Richard reading, a book like Future Shock that really reflected some really interesting things I was already observing about in studying the nature of invention and the progress and what seemed to be like I'm seeing as I go through these repeating the increasing speed at which different new technologies seem to be coming online through the last 200 years or whatever. And as I got a little older, I was thinking, yeah, this is probably just a perspective thing. This is, just because of myself, but also the writers who are compiling this, they're paying more attention to the more recent inventions. And we see that still to this day. But because of observations like that, because of reading things like Future Shock, it pretty much colored how I view the world and futures work ever since.
Great. That's great. So kind of wrapping things up here. So let's think about the long term and looking back. Legacy, yes. Future minds, heart of the machine, Mindstock, decades of work. It's like adding things up. It's like a life and a career, well lived. Like, what's the through line? What do you want people to get the perspective of Richard's impact on everything?
My perspective on it is I'm just getting started. I've got a lot of books still in me, and
in your brain.
Honestly, yes. I've got to write quite a few more of them in order to be able to connect all of these dots to figure out what that pattern or legacy might be. Honestly, I'm having a blast doing it.
That's great. Well, I just want to say it's been such a pleasure to have you on, and hope everyone had a great time listening to this conversation. It's quite a quite an adventure through the universes. I like this. That might be it might be part of the title for this episode. But just want to say thank you, and kind of so people want to find you. Like, what's a couple things? We'll have them in the show notes too. But I know you've got LinkedIn, your website. But where's the best place to kind of start with that?
So yeah, thank you for that. We'll have information in the show notes below. But my website is literally richardyonck.com. I think you can see my name on the bottom of the screen.
Yep, Yonck. Yep.
So Yonck and just one word.com for my professional site. And you can also find all of my books on there, but they're all available on Amazon and in libraries around the world and in various other bookstores, Barnes & Noble and what have you.
That's great.
Future Minds is out just this past several months ago, and it's the first in a series of 4, working on the next book at this time. And essentially that's where you find me. And if people want to have further conversations or reach out and engage me for either work or talk, please feel free.
Great. Thanks, Richard. And until next time.
All right. Thanks so much, Stephen. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Think Forward podcast. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms and at www.thinkforwardshow.com, as well as on YouTube under Think Forward Show. See you next time.